Hello, everybody. What is up? What is up, soul warriors? Welcome to the heat of the ascension, which is truly the return of Christ, my friends. So, if you have found this channel, there's a reason. I encourage you to check it out and stick around. And on this channel, you're going to find things that pertain to the return of Christ, okay? Who I am, I'm an ascension master, master healer, and a divine guide. Since 2019, I had my own Kundalini awakening that I did not plan on having. And then since then, I was doing healings, master status. It just came through me and doing things to the earth. And all of that is very pertinent, very important. So I encourage you to check all of that out, especially the Ascension playlist. Okay. For today's video, I asked about the Grand Canyon because I have seen a lot of people paying attention to the Grand Canyon. I personally have never really been there. I think one time I drove through there. I know it's very beautiful, right? But there's a lot of talk about the Grand Canyon. And so I asked Spirit, because I do that sometimes, is there anything about the Grand Canyon we needed to know? And again, I don't know a lot about it. So I channeled some information about that. And then after that, I asked them, is there anything we do know about any areas we're not paying attention to? And I got some information about that. So I'm going to talk about that today. Okay. So it's going to just be kind of a quick video about the Grand Canyon. Um, I just went into channeling. I didn't really look anything up until afterwards when I heard some of these things. Okay. So the Grand Canyon is a great tourist destination, right? I know that. You always hear about the Grand Canyon. You hear about people falling off the cliffs of Grand Canyon quite often. It's commonplace to hear about that. I live not too far from there and just a state or two over, one state over. Um, Well, yeah, kind of. So I live somewhat close to that area. Okay. So the Grand Canyon, this is what I got. I literally asked Spirit. I'm like, Spirit, what can you tell me about the Grand Canyon? What do we need to know? I've seen all these mysterious things about it, right? Um, First of all, I heard it's in Arizona and Utah. And I was like, oh, it's in both? I didn't know that either. Um, it's in Arizona and Utah, which is true. Um, and then what they said is it was once filled with water, and then they pointed to the Tri-Lakes. So it was once filled with water that was associated with the Tri-Lakes, and I had to look that up. I'm like, what is that? What is the Tri-Lakes? The Colorado River did fill into the Grand Canyon. And I'm going to talk more about, the original Earth energy of it. But because since the beginning of time, the Earth has changed a lot, right? They don't know a lot about history, okay? Some of the history they tell you is not true. And I witnessed that and partook in clearing out darkness back to the timeline of Adam and Eve. So, there's been a lot of history um, throughout the Earth's presence that some was destroyed, some was hidden on purpose, and some was just forgotten. Okay, so some of our timelines are off on things, and I'm getting a little bit of chills when I said that. But at one point, the Grand Canyon, well, let me start here. So back in the beginning of time, it was known as a ley line. It was an energetic ley line of the original Earth creation. Okay. So as part of the ley lines of the original Earth creation. So there is a lot of energy there, which probably, it's also beautiful, but it draws a lot of attention there because of that. And it's done that since like the beginning of time. Okay. And I'm getting chills as I say that too. But at one point, it was filled with water, and it was filled with water through the Colorado River. And I guess that did come through one of the Tri-Lake energies. So it does have energy of Tri-Lakes there when I saw it fill up with water. And I had to kind of look into that. I'm like, is it a Tri-Lake? I don't even know what that is. But up near there is Tri-Lakes, and I guess it came through there. Okay. So throughout history, they said, Spirit said, there has been occurrences or happenings there throughout history. Um, And whether or not you believe in this, if you watch my videos and the pyramid activations, when I activated pyramids, bringing about the ascension stuff, it is a beacon for aliens, and I've talked about that, what you would call aliens or extraterrestrials or just different frequency beings. Really, we can't be the only species on Earth. I mean, maybe you think we can, right? But I don't believe we can. That's too vast of a world to think that we are the only living creatures and beings. And also, aliens were very much so here. So, in one of the pyramid activations I did in the North Atlantic, I believe it was Atlantic Ocean, I had to undock an alien station that was underwater to activate the pyramids. And you can watch that. You can watch that in my Ascension playlist. So aliens have existed and they have long been here on Earth, okay? And if they have had ties with our governmental existence, they had contracts with them, they had they are well aware that they're here, okay? They are well aware. They gave them access um and they have agreements with them. They did at one point anyways, which will all be a part of a great fall. So you might hear my dog barking. You need to forgive that. So with the Grand Canyon, going back to the Grand Canyon itself, they did point to the fact that there is and has been alien activity there and cover-ups. Um, and this was regarding some possible missing people and other activity that have gone over there over the years. So, and even up to recent times, they're saying, I'm hearing that right now, even up to recent times, okay, because there is energy there, right? And so, different species attract to that energy. So when I was activating the pyramids too in the Return of Christ, I kept saying it's a beacon for alien activity. So you have to forgive my voice. I don't know why it's going out. The whole thing just feels yucky. I've been doing a lot of work through the 13 gate ascension implementation stuff. And so I'm working really hard every day. But I slow down a little bit. So Grand Canyon, the way it is now, is created through water. It filled up with water. Okay. So this whole area just kind of filled up with water. Um, I'm not sure if it was fully formed in that because they're not really saying that, but they're saying it was once filled with water. Throughout history, there has been occurrences or happenings throughout history, throughout the time of life. And one of that was an energy connection to the Tri-Lakes. Okay, so whether the water came from the Tri-Lakes or through the Tri-Lakes, it had to do with an origination of the Tri-Lakes. Okay. Then they said it was back to the beginning of time. It was part of the ley lines of the original Earth creations. Okay. Now, Mount Shasta is known as a ley line, but that was a false one. So there are true ones and there are false ones. And I also happen to know that Arizona has a lot of ley lines within it as well. So this makes a lot of sense to me. When I first had my awakening, I would travel a lot in my mind's eye, and I do that in the work that I do. And I would go to Arizona a lot, Sedona, Arizona, in my mind, not physically. I would just go there and meditate on like these little singular cliff thingies. So I know there is a lot of ley lines through Arizona as it is. Okay. Um, so that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's why it drew a lot of different beings there. And I'm going to talk about that too. But they are pointing to a lot of alien activity and cover-ups with missing people. Now I'm going to make sure I'm not missing anything because sometimes when they stop my throat, it's because I go fast and I need to slow down and see if I'm missing something Spirit is saying. So I'm going to create a space because sometimes when I do these, I'll channel them ahead of time. And then they'll come more through in live or during the video recording. Um, There has been chance encounters of another kind I'm hearing. So I'm just kind of staring at the paper. I'm saying like, what am I missing? Why is my throat continually doing this? Just in case there's something they're trying to say to me. Chance encounters of another kind. I keep hearing that. So people have been witness to alien activity there in the past, and there has been cover-ups. And that's what, so I have alien activity and it points to cover-ups. And so what I might have missed is that it's like chance encounters of another kind. So there have been witnesses to alien activity in the Grand Canyon, since the water subsided and even possibly before that. And they did cover-ups. So like your government, the people who have been in charge for some time, people of power, or at least perceived power, stolen power, created power, because it's not true power. They partook in these cover-ups. Okay, so there has been chance encounters in the Grand Canyon of alien activity. Okay. And it also pointed to missing people because I wrote missing people right after that. Okay. Um, and they were saying it was like one of the tri-lakes. So whatever that means, right? Like I wrote, once filled with water throughout history has been occurrences and happenings in one of the tri-lakes. So that could mean a few things. It could mean that one of the tri-lakes came through there, or the Colorado River broke through from the tri-lakes. I'm not sure. It's just what they're pointing to. Okay. And again, we don't always know everything. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? Okay. So then they had said it was part of the original Earth's creations, right? It is very much so an energetic ley line. So you know how people will go to like Sedona, Arizona, they could go to the Grand Canyon to meditate and get a lot of energy. However, there's also a lot of dark energy there because they said that well, with that alien activity and cover-ups and things like that, but there was also like a lot of bloodshed, and I'm going to talk about that. So there was Indian tribes, they said, right after, see how it's coming out. Then there were Native Americans, Indian tribes, whatever you want to call them. They call them great tribes. That's what Spirit's referring to them. And there were rituals there. And so it's known as there were burial ceremonies. There have been sacrifices there, but I'm not so sure just by the Native Americans. So this is going to get a little deeper. Okay. But there were burial ceremonies there. So sometimes they would bury their loved ones there. Sacrifices have also occurred there, so they're separating that, right? They're not saying the Native Americans did all the sacrifices. I truly believe sometimes it was the Native Americans that were sacrificed a little bit there. But there were burial ceremonies and more. Sacrifices have also occurred there. And it was known once as a place of great mysterious occurrences. So throughout history, it has been known as a place of great mysterious occurrences. Okay. They also said that that area of the Grand Canyon, and this is why Native Americans truly like kind of went there a lot, is because and probably throughout Utah and Arizona, but this area particularly feeds off the energy of the sun. Okay, the sun is very energetic. I did a lot with the sun and the moon during the return of Christ and Sekhmet and the Nile portal, returning back the language of the sun at one point from Lake Titicaca, which is a whole nother video, and how that pertained to Atlantis and things. But the Grand Canyon in itself feeds off the energy of the sun. So it actually almost like carries that energy. So as the sun would rise, I kind of see it soaking up that energy. And so it was used because of that, especially by other species of existence that have roamed this planet through governmental contracts of existence. Okay, so they were allowed to be here and there were lots of cover-ups. So if people would see them there, they would go and make sure those people were hushed in some way, shape, or form. Okay, think of the Men in Black. I keep hearing that. Okay, but then they said, that's about what they've said about the Grand Canyon. You're going to find different things about it. There has been missing people there. So not just people that go as tourists and kind of fall off the cliffs. These are people who truly go missing, or it's representative of their bodies being found there or being dumped there. Okay. So it has an energy presence of missing people. It doesn't necessarily mean, you guys, that people go there and become missing. That might be the case from time to time. But what I'm feeling is because it was written and the way it came out when I channeled it, and I'm getting some chills as I'm saying this, is that people would go missing all across the globe and you might actually find their remains there. Um, oh, 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 lots of chills when I said that. So, uh, there's a lot of validations when I said that, okay? So if people actually went down in there and checked things out, they might find these remnants of them if they looked hard enough, caves and different places like that. And they might be scattered about at this point, who knows? But there have been occurrences of missing people ending up there. Okay. And that came in the bracket of the alien activity and covers up as well. And the same with Mount Shasta. You guys, when I cleared Mount Shasta, there was hundreds of souls trapped there. And it wasn't just by man, like there was other energy there. Okay. And there was also tunnels underneath it. And that is where the original fallen burned in part two. So, there's been a lot of dark activity on this planet, and especially hidden through caves and underground tunnels and things and underwater. Because when I was activating pyramids, that is where I undocked in the North Atlantic Ocean, an alien ship. I keep saying North Atlantic Ocean. I would have to watch the pyramid activation again. And they would talk about spaceships coming in and out of the water. And I actually saw those ones. So they were like grayish and they did have black eyes, like you've heard probably, and no hair. And eventually they said they'll probably be found, but not alive. So, your friendly all around leaders do a lot of things that they don't tell you about, okay? But then they told me about the Grand Canyon, how it feeds off the energy of the sun. So not only are people drawn to that, but animals are too. So they called it a Canyon of the Eagles. And there's, the chills. There's a lot of eagles and wolves and aardvarks and roly-polies that roam that space, and different wildlife, lots of different wildlife. And it's like the home of many different species. So they put lots of wondrous wildlife, the Canyon of the Eagles, and I can see like all these beautiful eagles just flying around there, ones that we might have even thought to be extinct. Um, so after I channeled about that, the Grand Canyon, because I wanted to know, people have, had a focus there of what's going on with the Grand Canyon. And I've never really watched those videos, but they've always caught my eye. Okay. So then I was like, all right, Spirit, how about a space that we don't know of? Is there something on Earth we don't recognize, we're not talking a lot about, that maybe we should? And I just closed my eyes, and the first thing that I heard was the Utah Basin. And I'm like, Utah Basin? Again, never really been. I think I drove through Utah once. So I'm not even sure I ever saw the Grand Canyon or anything like that. It was a long time ago. And so in Utah Basin, they said strange occurrences, cults, rituals, espionage, and lots of bloodshed. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, where's the Utah Basin? And then I'm like, what do you mean? Strange occurrences, cults, rituals, espionage, and lots of bloodshed. And when I said the word cult, I saw like all of these like, like I don't like first of all, I don't judge, right? I'm just showing you what's happened in history and what true cults kind of are. And one of the words I hear is Mennonites. I hear like those kinds of Mormon type things. And I saw that, and we all are well aware by this point, I think that, it is a certain type of belief system that is well known to be over there, right? But again, I don't pay no mind to any of that stuff. I'm just me. Um, but through my awakening, I'm more drawn to a lot of the darkness that has happened to this earth. So the Utah Basin, I was like, well, what does that mean? So I looked it up after that. So there were a lot of Native Americans that were home to that space, right? So about AD 400, the Fremont culture began to emerge in northern and eastern Utah. It talked about a lot of Native American history. So the Utah Basin, when you type it up, has a name of the Uinta Basin. And I'm like, is that right? But it is. It's in northeastern Utah. Now, Arizona also combines with Utah towards that area, I do believe. But they do. So remember, the Grand Canyon is in Arizona, but also goes into a little bit of Utah. So this is very relevant. This is what Spirit said the focus should be more on, is what's really happened there. Um, And so I guess that expands into Colorado over in that area, which is where I'm at. But the Uinta Basin is a stacked formation of land. It's shifted. It's known as kind of like a dinosaur space. Great different like crustacean periods or something like that, right? But then I looked more into it. And at one point, so by the year 1700s over there, Navajos began to move into the area of Utah in search of pasture. Okay. So you had a lot of Native American tribes in that area. Now, here's the thing. The Mormons eventually settled into that area around the 1800s. And that's what it says. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, that validates what I saw and what I wrote down. There were different rituals. Now, when I say rituals, sometimes rituals are good. They're used for good things. They're used for love and support and honor and blessings, healings and things like that. But also sometimes rituals are used for dark things, okay, like cult behavior. Some things like you would hear about in Hollywood. So I want you to understand this is during the return of Christ, a lot of what has come through is the tangled web the darkness weaves. Okay. Hollywood, it stretches into your leadership, right? Of another kind. And I've done missing people or unsolved mysteries on like what happened to Tupac and Marilyn Monroe and different things like that on this channel too, back before I got into the new earth energy because they don't match and it all goes back to the same energy. Okay, it truly does. And these rituals that I keep pointing to in this are more like that. So there are rituals for control and manipulation and power. Bloodshed is used a lot, and it was at Mount Shasta too. Okay, so Mount Shasta had a lot of those kinds of rituals of bloodshed. It was never of light, you guys. They stole the light from Fiji. So Mount Shasta, they changed Fiji's root chakra and put it at Mount Shasta. And that's what created the false veil. The triangle with the eye was over it, and I returned it back to the portal of the gods later. You guys, this is relevant. Okay, so this is all a part of that movement of change, the shift from light to darkness. And I feel like this Utah Basin has something to do with that as well. Okay, so the Mormons settled in Salt Lake Valley area, same time around the Utah Basin, and started taking over land. And at that time, the government let them do it. They actually took the land from the Native Americans and said it should be open to the white man to purchase it instead. They called the Indians Lamanites, and said they associated with Israel. So you see what I'm saying? Then they said they associated with Israel. And if you truly know what happened to Jesus on my channel, that's not what they told you either. So it's all kind of ties into the same thing, you guys. If you've watched my channel, it's the Return of Christ stuff. It's not a joke. The Holy Grail came out in that and I had to clear it, which was created in Hebrew. It was a contract written in Jesus's blood in Hebrew. Now, this all goes back to like that area, that time frame, these different kinds of things. So, you know how energy is kind of all unit, time doesn't really exist, it morphs. And so throughout history, different things would happen, but they would have connections to the same kinds of things. So instead of the Grand Canyon, they're saying it's more about the Utah Basin and what happened there. Okay. So during that time, the Indian Bureau and the Mormon Church operated reservation farms, okay, for the benefit of Indian peoples, but they either provided inadequate or failed completely. So basically, they kind of took power of the land. And from what Spirit is saying, it was strange occurrences, cults, rituals, espionage, and lots of bloodshed. And I'm like, espionage? I'm just curious. Okay, so espionage is the practice of spying, or of using spies, typically by governments, to obtain political and military information. So, intelligence gathering is an act of obtaining secret or confidential information. A person who commits espionage is called an espionage agent or a spy. Any individual or spy ring in the service of government company, criminal organization, or any independent operation can commit espionage. So basically, what they're telling you and what they were telling me is that in the Utah Basin, the government committed espionage and took over the land, and the Mormons were involved. In a series of treaties, the federal government moved to extinguish Indian land claims in Utah and to confine all Indians on reservations. So they secluded them. They basically put them in conservation camps. The Gauchutes refused to leave their lands for either the Fort Hall or Uinta reservations. They lived on the West Desert until granted a reservation finally in the 1910s. Other ones refused to go to the Uinta reservation, so some of them refused, and became imprisoned. Um, wait, let's read that clearly, okay? And then they eventually settled in the uninhibited hills and desert areas of southern Utah. In the early 20th century in Kaibab, Shivwitz, and other names, they finally received tracts of reserved land. Okay, so they were giving little spaces to go because they didn't comply. But the small number of Navajo living in Utah increased dramatically following the conquest and imprisonment of the Navajo. Okay, so they still kind of migrated over. Some refused to be imprisoned and encamped. I would call it that because basically the Mormons came in and your government kind of worked in conjunct to take their land over, to actually plot it out and sell it, and said it needed to be sold to the white man in open sales, right? Um, so weakened by disease and starvation, the Indians faced annihilation or retreat. So they were either annihilated or they had to retreat. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So truthfully, the Utah Basin should be more a focus because your people of power, and right here in the Mormons, and this was found on Utah history, Uinta history, Utah history, the Utah Basin history, excuse me. I just looked it up and it's all right here. And Spirit had told me strange occurrences, cults, rituals, espionage, and lots of bloodshed. So basically, they came in and either they faced annihilation or they had to retreat. So the Mormons came in with the government. So they kind of worked together at that time. So here we go. So you guys, this is very relevant because I keep going to Mount Shasta. If Mount Shasta is on my Ascension playlist when I cleared it back in 2020, the part one. In part one, when I cleared Mount Shasta in part one, I undid the Emancipation Proclamation. They lied to you about that too. That actually did not become a thing until they assassinated Abraham Lincoln, because Abraham Lincoln truly wanted it for freedom, and that is not what it did, okay? So you have to be very careful with what they tell you. They manipulate you. So it also says this. Now it says this. In 1861, President Abraham Lincoln set aside the Uinta Valley Indian Reservation for the Utah Ute people. Oh. Oh, okay. So you guys, what a tangled web we weave. What a tangled web we weave. I'm like, this is making so much sense. I didn't see this coming. This goes back to what I did here. It goes back to what I did all the way back to Abraham Lincoln. So with Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham truly did want to free slaves. He wanted to free people. And you know, when a president in history has gone against their regime, their way of doing things, they assassinate them. And that's what they just tried to do to Trump. Okay. And this is why I talked about those two recently. I did a video about Trump's assassination, and Abraham Lincoln kept coming through in that. Okay. They were the two most hated presidents, right? Like they badmouthed him so bad. Let me slow down because they're mucking my throat. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The year he was assassinated, the same month, is when the Emancipation was changed and brought into law. Okay. And it did not really truly free any slaves or anybody that went against the government. It really didn't. They're actually saying it enslaved more than it freed. What really came out in that. So this actually has a tie to the Utah Basin here. So Abraham Lincoln set aside the Uinta Valley Indian Reservation for the Utah Ute people. And then by 1882, the federal government removed the Wright River and Uncompahgre Ute from Colorado to the Uinta and Ouray reservations in eastern Utah. So today, these bands are collectively called the Northern Ute Tribe. So part of the segregation. You feel me? So in a series of treaties with the Shoshone, Bannock, and the Goshoot by the 1863, the federal government moved to extinguish Indian land claims in Utah, excuse me, and to confine all Indians on reservations. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So in 1865, I believe, is when Abraham was assassinated. Echo, what year was Abraham Lincoln assassinated again?
Abraham Lincoln was killed on April 15th, 1865 by John Wilkes Booth.
Okay, so that was the same year the Emancipation Proclamation came into thing. You guys, if you watch Mount Shasta Part 1, if you watch what I talked about with Trump and everything else, I cleared the Emancipation Proclamation because it was not of light. It was not to free anybody. They actually trapped people. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865 because he truly did want to free people, just like what Mr. T is doing now, Trump. And that's why they attempted to assassinate him. Okay, but actually failed on that one because love won. All right. The return of Christ was completed for real. All right. So things are changing. I undid the Emancipation Proclamation. Like all these, you guys, this is very relevant to the return of Christ. That's why Spirit said to look into this. This is why Spirit, and I'm getting so many chills. Oh my gosh. This is why Spirit said to look into this. So in 1865, the year Abraham was assassinated, because he truly was the good guy, okay? They took back over and the government moved to extinguish Indian land claims in Utah, which is what Abraham had basically given them, and to confine all Indians on reservations. So these are conservation camps. Like when they do it to other cultures and other, it's recognized, but when they're doing it to Native Americans, it wasn't recognized. So the Ghost Shoots refused to leave their lands for either the Fort Hall or Uinta reservations. Okay, so either they would comply, or what did it said? They were annihilated. Or I can't find that again. So if they didn't comply, they were basically annihilated. Espionage. Oh my gosh, you guys, I had no idea. So when I asked Spirit, what else do we need to know about the earth that we're not talking about? And they said the Utah Basin, strange occurrences, cults, rituals, espionage, and lots of bloodshed. And it goes all the way back to Abraham Lincoln, which is what I cleared in Mount Shasta Part 1 and 2. I'm like, this is Return of Christ stuff, man. Okay. And in part of the Return of Christ stuff, more Native American things came out, like for the Great Northern Star in Western or Northern Asia. And actually I had a lifetime in that where I was like scalped. So, they would come in, ha 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 ha, ha, lots of chills. Okay. So in 1934, as part of legislation activity known as the New Deal, Congress passed the Wheeler-Howard or Indian Reorganization Act, aimed at promoting Indian self-determination. Most Utah Indian groups accepted the IRA and elected tribal governments or business committees, passed laws, and began planning strategies for reservation economic development. So this is all in slavery. If you go back to Abraham Lincoln, it was about Emancipation Proclamation to release the slaves. And instead, they assassinated him in 1865, changed it, and enslaved more. And this just goes back to Mount Shasta Part 1 in the Return of Christ work that I did on this channel. It's uploaded on this channel, you guys. I've been doing it since 2019. This is totally mind-blowing. No wonder I felt called to do the Grand Canyon. And then I was like, what do we really need to know about some area? And they went to the Utah Basin, which goes all the way back to Abraham Lincoln, espionage, lots of bloodshed, cults, the Mormons, rituals, and strange occurrences. You guys, throughout history, religion is also a shadow, and I've talked about that. They like to divide and conquer and judgment. And I know this for a fact, and not to talk bad about anybody, but Mormons will they will ban their own. Like if you do anything outside of their belief system, they will judge you and ban you. There's no love there. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of love in that, growing up in that way. And so this is a full circle moment for me. This is quite profound and quite of what has been being cleared out of darkness from the beginning of time. Mount Shasta is somehow also tied into this because in Mount Shasta, part 1, I undid the Emancipation Proclamation. So I had to learn what I was doing after that. Abraham Lincoln, I was like, why is that happening? He was a good guy. That's why he was assassinated in 1865. Once they assassinated him in 1865, they changed the Emancipation Proclamation and put it into law. But also at that time, they extinguished Indian land claims. They stole the land from them in Utah and confined them all on specific reservations. They enslaved them. The truth shall set you free, my friends. What a tangled web they weave. Oh my. This makes so much sense. And if you're new here, I encourage you to watch the Return of Christ playlist. Mount Shasta was one of the first things that I had to clear after I rose Atlantis and the energy. I cleared Mount Shasta, part 1. And in part 2, there was a tunnel under there, and Archangel Samael was the first fallen angel, and he burned there. But the Emancipation Proclamation came out in part 1. And somehow it's tying all the way to the Utah Basin as well. Wow. Mind blown. So originally video about Grand Canyon, ended about the espionage, strange occurrences, ties back to Abraham Lincoln, the Return of Christ stuff, the presidential campaigns, enslavement of mankind, Utah Basin. Boy, what a tangled web we weave. How many other places, I wonder, are like this across the globe, right? Many. They lied to you about everything, my friends, from what happened to Jesus to what pyramids truly are, to Adam and Eve, the sun and the moon, to Sekhmet and Horus, Jesus and Mary Magdalene. They lied about everything, and including the presidents and our land, and any president that's gone against their ways of doing things was assassinated, or with Mr. T, an attempt of assassination. Because they failed that one, they might do it again. So stay vigilant. Now is the time to rise. All of this is coming out for a reason, my friends. Watch the videos on my Ascension playlist, from the pyramid activations, clearing Mount Shasta. I keep telling everybody, was part of the veil, the illusion that what they're doing is good versus not good. And all along, what they were doing was enslaving all of mankind. And that's exactly what happened to Jesus's soul, which I spent a whole year battling for. And my original DM did not make it. Okay, the ascension almost didn't make it. It was a battle. This is so cool. Have a beautiful day, my friends. I will see you next time. Bye.